Okay, I think it is working. Maybe it's not. Okay, oh, yes, it seems to be working. Anyway, I hope you can hear me. It would be such a shame if you could not. That's my woodchuck. So yesterday I finished the inlay and I did start to mark the main, sorry, stuff is heavy. I did start to mark the main thing. Can try to show you. See? So I'm going to do it now. That's all I have to say, my God. I thought I was French, and that I will always have something to say and to add. But I do not at this point. So let me play with my thing. I don't know if I can make that one a little bigger. I did. I don't know if it's really an improvement. Anyway, going to look at my picture, if I can find it. Here you are. I'm going to start with the head for no particular reason. And I'm going to turn my audiobook on.
My own path, not trail after his. I picked up the device, smiling at a shot of Indy and me dressed in our formal wear, heading to the only school dance we ever attended. Life was so different before the Angor. My finger lingered on the screen. My heart ached, but it wasn't Xeno this time. Enough of this. For a guy with such a bleak future, I couldn't get hung up in the past. She'd left, I'd stayed, and that was that. I went to the offices and smiled at Barb, typing softly at her desk. She was on the computer talking with another job site. Of course, we'll send that information over in a jiffy. Thanks, Harry. No problem. Say hi to Glory and the kids. All the best. The call ended and Barb lost her smile. I hate that guy. Harry? I asked. He's pressuring me for details on our project, even though he knows damn well this is classified, Barb said in a huff. I didn't often worry about what we were building here on the barge. I rarely left the compound, and when I did, it was for medical appointments or personal supply runs. Even those were few and far between, since the Angor brought in anything we needed from requisition forms. What does he think we're doing? The truth was, none of us knew what we were building. It was a gigantic floating pad with buildings and a massive complex covering quadrants 3, 4, and 5. The dome was under works, but my crew hadn't set foot near it. We did the foundation, then were sent to build additional quadrants to surround the dome. That was another department, and that crew stayed on the opposite end of the barge. He won't come out and say it, since practically everything is logged and recorded on our calls? But he's hinted it's bad news, Barb said quietly. That had my interest. What kind of bad news? Maybe a biome to test other atmospheres? She pointed to the ceiling. They altered our environment years ago. Perhaps they're preparing to modify it again. I cleared my throat. Barb didn't know about my condition. Why would they do that? Barb was 10 years older than me and wore thick black-framed glasses. Her sandy hair was in a loose bun on the top of her head, and she sauntered to my desk, leaning closer. The rumor is they want to accommodate another race. I almost fell out of my chair. Another race of what? Aliens, she whispered. No way. But what if there was a hint of reality to the rumor? If the Angor and humans could coexist, countless other beings could also be capable of interstellar travel. If anyone knew the truth, it wasn't a site supervisor and his administrative assistant. Only the bigwigs in New York and Paris would be informed, and that was if the Angor's leaders shared any details with them. I suspected we were left in the dark for a reason. Barb perked up. Who's to say? All I know is Harry has a big mouth. I logged into the network and searched for last night's surveillance files on Quadrant 9. The archives were empty. Barb, was anyone in here? Just me. She poured a cup of coffee and brought it over. I eyed her suspiciously. Barb was a lot of things, but corrupt wasn't one of them. I couldn't picture her disrupting our latest project. Then tell me why I'm missing 10 hours of footage? Missing footage? I almost forgot. I did see Barney leaving when I got in this morning. She returned to her desk, answering a call. Barney. I tried him on the tablet, but there was no answer. It chimed a moment later. The message asked me to meet him in Shed 5. Apparently the reserve pump was past its inspection date, and he wanted my approval to authorize its use. Barb, I said, and she muted her call. If you don't hear from me in 20 minutes, contact Rolosh. Tell him I need backup at 5. Start the clock. She did it without preamble, and I left, stalking my way toward Barney. It was him. I considered waiting to trade her out and sending the Angor after him, but wanted to hear what he had to say before I turned him in. It might have been a simple error that he was trying to cover. The Angor were fair, but one sign of disobedience broke our contract with them. Welcome to 2059, where you have the right to a fair trial unless you betray our alien invaders. Then, you're at their mercy. The sheds were huge structures, housing any of the raw materials, electronics, and mechanical units that couldn't be out in the open air. The ocean was a damp and caustic place, especially with the constant salt water splashing over the barge's ledges. I walked to Shed 5 and listened. It was silent. I must have beaten Barney here. Using the code, I pushed open the door. A blunt object smacked my skull, knocking me off my feet. I instinctively raised my hands, anticipating a second blow. You weren't supposed to be back yet. I thought I had more time, and you had to step off that ferry. I retreated, trying to stand. Barney struck me again, hitting my arm with a heavy wrench. My head ached, and I blinked, struggling to refocus. What are you doing? The Angor! This place? It's a testing facility. He lunged at me, but I managed to roll away, hopping up on wobbly legs. What are you going to do about it? I demanded. Barney stalked after me, holding his makeshift weapon. Drown them! I'm going to sink the entire barge. I had to test it with Quadrant 9 since it's under construction. Once I knew the fail-safes could be overridden, then I had to make my move. Tonight. Barney, we've known each other for 5 years. Why not come to me with your concerns? I dodged another swing, his wrench sending a jar of machine screws to the floor. You'd never listen to me. You're too by the book, Beck. You don't let anything slide and always report any indiscretions. I'm just doing my job, I hissed. Don't you see? These are aliens, Beck. They're not our friends. Nothing they've done is for us. It's for themselves. Barney was clearly agitated. That's not true. You don't have to do this. I glanced at the door, and he caught the flicker of my eyes. Are you expecting someone? He asked. No. Beck, why do you always have to be such a sucker? Barney lashed out, and I blocked his strike. The wrench toppled from his grip, clattering to the floor while I elbowed the softer man in the gut. He keeled over, gasping for air. I shoved him off balance, and he crashed into the shelving along the wall. I've had a shitty day, Barney. I jogged around the excavator, but Barney wasn't there. I don't care, he replied, and I looked up into the barrel of an old rifle. How he'd obtained it was a mystery. Go ahead. Shoot me. I'm a dead man anyway. 6 months. I let my arms flop down, my hands heavy at my hips. What are you going on about? The rifle remained aimed at my face. Xeno. I have it. Discovered it a few months after they showed up. No cure. Today was the day, Barney. I muttered, and the barrel dropped slightly. I found out I was going to die. We're all going to die, he mumbled. Not like this. My arm throbbed and my head pounded fiercely. White spots blurred my vision, but I stayed upright. Then you should be on the same page as me, he told me candidly. Help me destroy the facility. We'll cover our tracks and start over. I have friends. Loyal ones. He was part of the loyalists? I shook my head. I'd rather you finish the job now. Staring at my crazed sidekick, I realized it was true. I had no reason to go on. I closed my eyes and heard the gunshot. When I opened them, Barney was dashing off, firing at the entrance. Someone hollered from outside the shed, and I watched as 2 drones hovered closer, shooting Barney with crackling blue energy. He shuddered, dropped his gun, and shouted at the top of his lungs in agony. A second later, his body crashed to the floor. Blood dripped from his nose. Is he dead? I asked. No, this only incapacitates the offender, Rolosh said. I wasn't sure if I should be happy or upset. Barney had wanted to kill me after all. Thank you, Mr. Beck. Rolosh entered, using a device on his wrist to call back the drones. I glanced at Barney's body and felt nothing. No problem. He asked me questions, but I just walked past him. Checked the other quadrants. Barney was planning on flooding the place tonight. Where are you going? Rolosh asked, his voice flat. I thought about that a moment and grabbed my tablet. Amy Horowitz's contact information popped up, and I sent her a quick message. Still want that drink? Her response came a few seconds later. 2. The sun set in the horizon while I walked the beach, pausing as a few surfers passed by. They were in high spirits, laughing and shaking water from their wetsuits. I wondered when I'd last had fun like that, but couldn't recall. The barge was visible from the coast, its bright lights continuous while construction remained throughout the night. I was already dreading my return, and dinner with Amy hadn't even begun. I crossed the beachside street and smiled at the couples paired up. Despite the Angor running the show, they were out on dates, enjoying the company of friends, or simply appreciating the fresh air. Most people were just living their lives, yet mine was nearly over. I tried to feel happy for them, but resentment was a bitter pill. An Angor taxi lowered, letting one of the aliens out at the corner, and he stared at me like I was in the wrong place. Instead of confronting him, I turned, heading down the other street. I glanced over my shoulder, where his gaze remained steady. After jogging across the intersection, I checked again. He was nowhere in sight. Probably nothing. My nerves were on edge tonight. I'd had one hell of a day. My head was slightly tender and my forearm was bruised, but I'd recover. I wasn't sure if the same could be said about Barney. The restaurant was a few blocks away, and I had 15 minutes to kill, so I went slowly, peering in storefronts, wondering why anyone would still buy trinkets and decorative plates. Some days, it felt like I was living on a different planet than the rest of humanity. I barely understood my own people anymore. My tablet beeped and pulsed, so I checked it, finding my mother's smiling face. It was an old photo, so it was always a shock when the live screen instantly added 10 years to her age. I tapped accept and braced myself for an awkward conversation. Before I had a chance to say anything, she started in on me. Colton, why haven't you contacted us? It's been a month. I've been busy, Mom, I told her. Busy? For your own parents? How are you? You look tired. The classic line from my mother. I was always tired and underfed, or I needed a haircut, or a wife. I ignored the jab. I'm great, never better. 2 police officers patrolled the streets, chatting somberly as they passed. My mother hushed up as they went by. You should move to Florida. It's much safer. Mom, LA is fine. Enough about that. How's Dad? I checked the time, realizing I had to expedite this conversation. Amy would be waiting. Your father is okay. His arthritis is acting up, she told me. Another of her ploys. She'd been resolute that I stay with them over the past year. Every conversation, something else was wrong with them, implying they needed me nearby. Look, Mom, I better run. I was about to say meeting a woman, but that would open a flood of questions I didn't want to answer. Needed for a work thing. Always working. I guess it's good to keep yourself busy. Are you feeling okay? Have you seen the doctor? My mother's lips tilted down, her eyes widening. Fit as ever, I lied. There's something I need you to do for me. I've sent a package to the coast. Your father brought it with us to Florida and finally found a buyer. Can you pick it up in the morning and deliver it to an address? Mom's expression stayed friendly, but there was a momentary darkness in her eyes. Sure, send me the details. Already done. He's a private guy. Can you make sure to delete the message when you finish? That was strange. But with my parents, the request wasn't out of the ordinary. Okay. Remember, when they give you that timeline, come home. Promise me, she said. I couldn't lie. Not so blatantly. I'll talk to you soon. Love you. She looked ready to offer something of dire consequence. Be careful, Colton. You're very important. My mother always said things like this, and I smiled and nodded, ending the call. I knew every mother told their children how special they were, but she continued to be unwavering in her commentary, even into my 30s. There were times when I wondered if she'd lost her grip on reality. The restaurant was ahead, and I hurried, not wanting to keep Amy Horowitz waiting. You're kidding me, Amy said, unable to keep her patented grin from her face. Not at all. The music was soft jazz, and we sat on the top floor of the expensive building overlooking the ocean. At this moment, I wished I was farther inland, back home in Arkansas, working at my father's store. Life was much simpler then. What did Rolosh say? She asked. I don't know. I left. I was thankful we'd been able to meet up, but my exhaustion was apparent. Amy's hand found mine, and she let it linger. Her finger ran over my stubble, and she brushed my hair from my eyes. You're different. I smiled at her choice of words. You mean older? Yes, but not in a bad way. Rougher. You're always so clean cut. Do you dye your hair? It's so brown. And those eyes match perfectly. Can we talk about something else? And no, I don't dye my hair. I laughed at her suggestion. I used to look forward to things, I mumbled. She touched the back of my head and I winced. I'm glad you're okay. Should you see a doctor about that bump? Nope, no more doctors for me. I glanced at her and took a deep breath. I have Xeno. I blurted it out and started laughing. I couldn't stop, because the expression on her face changed so quickly. She didn't even seem like the same woman. Why are you laughing? She demanded. Is this a sick joke? I finally gathered my wits and took a long drink. The stuff was brown and potent. She'd ordered it for me since I rarely drank. Now I knew why. Nope, I'm not kidding. I've known for 19 years. Most people shied away from anyone with the defect, but she did the opposite. She came closer, setting her forehead on my neck. 19 years. What a burden to live with. She blanched at her word choice, but I shrugged. You get used to it. They might create the cure. I heard the doctor gave me 6 months. Today. She waved the waitress down, ordering 2 more stiff beverages. Today? Her eyes went wide. That's where you were coming from when we met on the ferry. No wonder you were so morose. I wasn't morose, I claimed, but her assessment was spot on. Well, good for you. I'd have been a pool of my own tears on the floor. What are you going to do? She asked. The drinks came and I sipped mine. No idea. I wish there was some way I could help, she whispered. There is. She offered a sly smile. Colton, are you suggesting we finish what we started back then? Not quite. Maybe. I focused. What's this big announcement coming tomorrow? I can't. I just saved the barge from being destroyed and I'm dying. Surely your morals can make a trivial exception. Amy slid to her corner of the booth. Colton, I could get in some serious... I won't tell. I don't even have anyone to share it with. Barney had been my closest ally, and he was on his way to some Angor prison, I assumed. That was what we were told when someone broke the rules. Amy was a second-tier government official, meaning she had access to far more information than most humans. She peered around, as if making sure no one could overhear our conversation. An Angor woman sat with a human woman 20 feet away, and they seemed jovial while sharing appetizers. It's big, Colton. Apparently, in the initial Unity Accord, there was a subclause indicating a reward level after 2 decades of compliance. Several factors were in place, basically a ranking system based on our conformity with their rules. I sat on the edge of my seat, listening intently. The music drowned out. The lights dimmed in my mind, and all I saw was Amy. All I heard were her gentle words. What does that mean? Even my voice sounded alien. There's another planet. A colony. The Angor have offered it to us. We'll build a river checkpoint there. Wait. A what? Checkpoint. The Angor utilize a series of checkpoints to traverse the river. I've heard rumors that they built one for Earth as well. Within a few years, we may have access between this new world and Earth. Amy sat back, swirling her beverage like she was the mastermind behind this decision. What's in it for the Angor? I asked. Amy stared blankly at me. Seriously, why go to all this trouble to give us a second home? The resources to construct this checkpoint? They've sent 250,000 of their own people to our planet, and they not only spent a decade getting here, but 20 years working with us to improve Earth. Why? She assessed me, her head tilting slightly. It was like she saw the real me for the first time. No smirks, no batting eyelashes, no innuendo. We don't know. I downed the rest of my drink. My head was already fuzzy from the day's events, and I was starting to tire. Then why do we trust them so implicitly? I said this too loud, and noticed the Angor woman glance over. Amy smiled, pretending we were having a fun conversation. She spoke low. Don't talk like that, Colton. I knew I shouldn't have said anything. It's okay. I'm done. Who cares why they came? I won't be around to find out. I waved for the waitress, and Amy set a hand on my arm. I think you've had enough. You're right. When is this crew leaving for the colony world? I asked. I can't tell. Amy, for one night, let's pretend it doesn't matter. Just give me this. Tomorrow you can return to hiding your secrets. I'll continue to play the Foundation supervisor role, and we'll all move on. I noticed the shift in her mood, and she relaxed her shoulders. About a month. They leave then. However, that's it. No more information. You'll hear the details with the rest of the world tomorrow. Amy's hand was still on me. I glanced at it, then at her. How about one more? Long shadows cast over the bay as the sun rose behind the hotel. I was late. My aching head reminded me of last night, and I tossed the bedding to the floor, searching for Amy. She was nowhere to be found. An empty bottle of wine sat beside the bed, and I chuckled. I'd almost been killed yesterday, and my second in command had been detained by the Angor. Instead of worrying about it, I'd gotten drunk in the arms of a beautiful woman. "Amy?" I called, and heard the water running in the bathroom. She bustled out a moment later, looking polished in a black pantsuit. "I have to go." "You're heading to the barge?" I asked. She nodded, avoiding eye contact. "I am." "Then wait for me. We'll go together." She shook her head. "You take the ferry." "How are you?" She pointed at the window, and I saw the Angor ship flying to the hotel. It was Rolosh's private transport. "Amy, about last night." She stopped at the door and watched me. "Yes." "I didn't mean to put you on the spot with the Angor, but I did have fun." She finally smiled and winked as she exited. "So did I." The door closed, and I was alone in her penthouse suite. So, this was what it was like living as a government official. Maybe I should have ventured into politics. I was due to start my shift in 20 minutes. I quickly showered and rushed to the ferry dock, taking the last one this hour. There was only a single person on the boat with me, and I nodded at him, seeing he was from the Dome crew. I was curious. "Good morning," I said with a wave. "Hey, you're Beck, right?" the man asked. He was middle-aged, fit, and had a full head of hair. Strong. Probably worked with his hands all day. "That's me, and you are?" "Victor." We shook. "Dome crew?" "Let me guess, fasteners and glass," I chanced. "What gave it away?" He laughed. "Work on the barge since ground zero and you pick up a few things. How's it going over there?" "Good, I think. You know how it is." I thought about what Barney had said in regard to the atmosphere testing. "What kind of tanks are loaded beneath it?" "Tanks?" "Gases," I said nonchalantly. He raised an eyebrow. "Not my department." "But you've asked, right?" I knew their crew would discuss the details. They'd be curious as to what they were constructing. "This is between us?" Victor blinked a couple of times. "You have my word." I placed a palm on my heart. "Nitrogen, carbon dioxide, oxygen, argon, xenon." He listed them off, pausing after each element. That wasn't unreasonable. There were trace amounts of the last two in our own atmosphere. "There's also an unmarked tank," he whispered, glancing around as if someone might be spying. "Of course there is." The ferry reached the docking.